This is Daily Story, where the scariest and most haunting tales are told every day. The strange noises in the night, the silent figures in the dark, the memories no one dares to recall, all come alive here. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, if you're brave enough. And don't forget to leave a comment, because who knows, your story might be the next haunting tale we tell. Now let's begin.
You know, I never figured myself for the dating app type. It always seemed like a concession, an admission that the traditional ways of meeting people had failed you. For most of my 20s, romance was this abstract concept, something that happened to other people. My friends were a constant source of secondhand drama chaotic hookups, emotionally charged long-term relationships, or the messy, cinematic fallout from a breakup. My life, by contrast, was a flat line. My weekends were a predictable, monotonous rotation, hours lost of video games in my dimly lit living room, picking up overtime at the warehouse to numb the boredom, or meeting the same two friends at the same dimly lit sports bar to talk about the same old things. It was not for a complete lack of trying. I would stumble through a couple of brief, forgettable relationships in college, but they were hollow, nothing that ever felt serious, nothing with any real staying power. By the time I hit 27, I was starting to get this sinking feeling in my gut, a quiet dread that the ship had sailed and I would have been left standing on the shore. It did not help that I was acutely aware of my own shortcomings. I was not exactly what you would call a head-turner. Average height, a frame that was neither athletic nor overweight, and hair that was already starting to thin at the crown. The faint, pitted remnants of teenage acne still marked my cheeks. I was not hideous, but I also was not the kind of guy who earned a second glance from across a room. My co-workers, in their own well-meaning but brutal way, liked to joke that I had more of an IT support look than a swipe-right one. So, in the suffocating heat of the summer of 2019, sitting alone in my small, sterile apartment in the quiet, forgettable town of Blackwood, Ohio, I finally gave in. The silence of the apartment was deafening that night. I downloaded Tinder, the blue and orange flame icon feeling like a brand on my phone screen. I remember thinking to myself, with a kind of grim resignation, what is the worst that could possibly happen? The first few weeks were a perfect, soul-crushing reflection of my lowest expectations. It was a wasteland of awkward, stilted conversations with women who would either unmatch me abruptly mid-sentence or just let the chat fade into the digital ether. The women I found genuinely attractive, the ones who made my breath catch in my throat for a second, naturally, did not swipe on me at all. I was not surprised. I would read enough internet forums to know that dating apps could be a brutal, unforgiving landscape for an average-looking guy. It was a game I was not built to win. But then there was her. Her name was Alara. She had long, sun-streaked blonde hair, striking blue eyes that seemed to sparkle even in her photos, and a smile that held both a hint of mischief and a warm, disarming invitation. To be blunt, she was completely and utterly out of my league. I was so sure it was a mistake that I almost did not believe the notification when it popped up on my screen. Alara has sent you a message. My first thought was that it had to be a bot or some kind of elaborate scam designed to prey on lonely guys like me. Her first message was disarmingly simple, almost suspiciously so. Alara, hey, I like your smile. I actually laughed out loud, a short, sharp, incredulous sound in the quiet of my apartment. No one had ever complimented my smile before. My instinct was to ignore it, to write it off as fake and move on. But 3 days later, another message appeared. Alara, so are you going to leave me hanging, or do you not like blondes? I stared at that message for a long, long time. She seemed real. Her profile had multiple pictures, not just the perfectly posed glamour shots, but casual, candid ones, too. There was one of her laughing with a golden retriever, another of her squinting into the sun at a lake, and even one she captioned as being with her brother at a baseball game. Against my better judgment, against every cynical instinct I had, I finally replied, "Me, sorry. Thought you might be a bot. Didn't want to waste your time." Her response was almost instant. a little bubble popping up as she typed. Ilara, all fair. I promise I am real. And just like that, we started talking. To my complete and utter surprise, it felt natural, effortless. She was witty and playful, but she also asked real questions and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Within a week, we were texting from morning until night. Within 2, we had graduated to nightly video calls. Seeing her face on the screen, hearing the musical quality of her laugh, it was undeniable. She was real, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt seen. I felt wanted. After about a month of this digital courtship, Ilara suggested I drive down to visit her. She lived in a small, rural town called Gravesend, a place I would never even heard of, about a 7-hour drive from me. My immediate reaction was a knot of hesitation in my stomach. Meeting someone from an app in person felt inherently risky, a leap of faith I was not sure I was ready for, especially someone so far away. But she was persistent in her reassurances, her voice smooth and calming over the phone. Ilara on video call, "Look, I get it. If you are nervous, we can just meet in a public cafe or something. I just really think we should finally hang out in person. Do not you. I feel like I already know you." I caved. The desire to see if this was real outweighed the fear. I put in a request for 2 days off from work, texted my brother her name and the address she would give me just as a precaution, and packed an overnight bag. The morning I left, I was a walking bundle of nerves and a giddy, unfamiliar excitement. That excitement did not last the journey. The drive was long and monotonous, a blur of gray highway and identical-looking rest stops. But what began to truly gnaw at me was Ilara's texting. It quickly went from excited to obsessive. Every half hour, like clockwork, a new message would pop up. Where are you now? How much longer? Why are not you replying faster? At one point, she sent 10 messages in a row, a frantic cascade of notifications, all because I had been driving through a dead zone for 40 minutes and had not responded. Me finally texting back, "Hey, relax. I am on the road. Don't want to crash. LOL. Ilara, sorry, just so excited. I can't wait to see you. Hurry." I tried to brush it off as her just being anxious and excited. But the closer I got, the stranger things became. The direction she would give me eventually led me off the main highway and onto a series of long, winding gravel roads. The trees on either side were dense and dark, their branches interlocking overhead to form a kind of natural, claustrophobic tunnel. Every road looked identical. There were no streetlights, no road signs, just an endless, disorienting maze of trees. My GPS eventually gave up, the screen freezing on a blank, gray map with single blinking in the middle of nowhere. When I finally pulled up to the address, it was just after 2:00 in the afternoon, and the house that stood before me was a far cry from what I had pictured. It was old, the kind of old that felt deeply tired and neglected. One of the upstairs windows was boarded over with a warped sheet of plywood, and the pale yellow paint on the siding was peeling away in long, curling strips like sunburnt skin. The only sign of recent life was a small, faded blue sedan parked near a dilapidated garage, the same one she would mention she drove. I texted her, here. Her reply was just a single, cryptic smiley face. Still, I got out of the car and walked up the overgrown, cracked concrete path. As I raised my hand to knock on the weathered front door, I froze. In the second floor window, the one that was not boarded up, an old man was staring down at me. He was shockingly pale and gaunt, his face a skeletal mask of taut skin and sharp angles. He did not move, did not so much as blink. He just stared, his eyes like dark, empty pits. My stomach coiled into a tight, cold knot, but then I remembered Ilara had offhandedly mentioned her dad once. Maybe this was him. Maybe he was just protective. I took a breath and knocked. A moment later, the door swung open. It was Ilara. She was even more beautiful in person, and my anxiety momentarily vanished. She smiled, pulled me into a quick, warm hug, and invited me inside. The interior of the house was dark and smelled of dust and something vaguely sweet, like potpourri left out for too long. The tension in my shoulders eased for a second until I asked, as casual as I could, "So, did not know your dad was here today." Ilera looked utterly confused. "My dad." "Yeah," I said, gesturing upwards with my thumb. He was looking at me from the upstairs window. When I pulled up, the color drained from her face so fast it was like watching a light switch being flipped. "My dad's in Florida right now," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He won't be back for weeks." I swear my blood turned to ice in my veins. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, her knuckles white. "We need to leave," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with a terror that looked far too real. "Now." We hurried back outside, the screen door slamming shut behind us. We put as much distance between us and the house as we could, stopping at the edge of the gravel driveway. I kept asking her what was going on, who that could have been, but she just shook her head, her face pale and drawn. I was the one who finally pulled out my phone and called the police. When 2 deputies arrived half an hour later, their demeanor was one of bored skepticism. They did a full search of the house, their heavy boots echoing on the old wooden floors. They found nothing. No old man, no signs of a forced entry. The only thing out of place was the back door, which was standing wide open, leading out into the dense woods. They told us to lock everything up tight and to call again if anything else happened, then drove off, leaving us in a cloud of dust and unease. That night, Ilera begged me not to leave her alone in the house. We locked every door and every window, checking them twice. We retrieved her dad's old, heavy shotgun from a dusty cabinet in the hallway and settled onto the floral patterned couch in the living room. She eventually drifted off to sleep, her head resting on my shoulder, but I stayed awake. I could not close my eyes. I sat there in the dark, the heavy shotgun resting across my lap, the low, monotonous murmur of an old movie on the television filling the oppressive silence. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard it, the slow, deliberate, metallic rattle of a doorknob from upstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I gently moved Ilera off my shoulder, grabbed the shotgun, and crept up the creaking stairs, my hands slick with sweat. In the dim, milky light filtering into the kitchen from the moon outside, I saw him. Through the panes of glass in the back door, the old man was standing there, his face just inches from the glass. His hollow eyes locked onto mine. He looked startled for a brief, terrifying second. Then he turned and bolted, melting into the impenetrable darkness of the woods. I scrambled back downstairs, shook Ilera awake, and breathlessly told her what I would seen. We called the police again. Another search, another dead end. This time, the officers were visibly annoyed. They strongly suggested we stay somewhere else for the night. Ilera called a friend who lived in the next town over. I told her I would follow her there in a bit, but I needed a minute to collect myself. I sat in my car for a long while, the engine off, calling my brother and trying to get my racing pulse under control. That is when I saw him one last time, standing at the far edge of the yard, almost perfectly camouflaged by the shadows of the trees. He was watching me. His thin, skeletal frame was silhouetted by the faint, yellow glow of the porch light. He took one slow, deliberate step towards my car. I did not wait to see if he would take another. I floored it. Ilera and I went on a couple more dates after that night, meeting in brightly lit coffee shops and crowded restaurants. But I could never shake the memory of that house, of that pale, gaunt face in the window. She never went back to that house alone, and eventually, the texts and calls between us just stopped. The shared trauma was too much to build anything on. To this day, I have no idea who that old man was, how he got inside her house, or why the police could never find a single trace of him. But I know this much. Every time the thought of downloading a dating app crosses my mind, I see that upstairs window. I see that pale skeletal face staring down at me, and I immediately, without hesitation, close the app. I never thought I would be the kind of person to use Tinder. For most of my 20s, I held on to this fragile, romanticized idea that dating apps were a last resort, a place for people who were either desperate or just looking for a quick, meaningless hookup. I wanted something real, the kind of connection you read about in books, something that happens organically in a quiet bookstore, a cozy coffee shop, or through a chance introduction by a friend of a friend. That is how my parents met, and I wanted to believe, perhaps naively, that their kind of story was still possible for me. But then my last relationship imploded. It was not a fiery crash. It was a slow, grinding collapse. After 4 years of a shared apartment, shared bills, and what I mistakenly thought were shared plans for the future, it all just fell apart. In the aftermath, I found myself staring at my bedroom ceiling night after night, a hollow, cavernous ache in the center of my chest. It was not just a heartbreak. It was the oppressive, suffocating silence. It was the kind of silence that amplifies every tiny sound, making the low hum of the refrigerator sound like a blood-curdling scream. I would stop going out. I would start ignoring my co-workers' invitations for after-work drinks, offering flimsy excuses they eventually stopped questioning. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of my apartment, a self-imposed prison of grief and solitude. One night, lost in that thick, heavy silence, my best friend Chloe called me. "You can't keep living like this, Amelia," she said, her voice firm and unwavering in that way only a best friends can be. "You need to put yourself back out there. Not for him, for you." "I am not ready," I mumbled, my throat tight with unshed tears. "You do not have to be ready for another relationship," she insisted, her tone softening slightly. "Just talk to people. Have some fun. Flirt with a stranger. Remind yourself that life is still happening outside your apartment." I did not argue. I just listened. And later that same night, fueled by a mix of loneliness and cheap wine, I downloaded Tinder. The first week was a grim, disheartening reminder of why I would avoid it for so long. It felt like scrolling through a catalog of human mannequins, each one more generic than the last. Guys holding up massive, glassy-eyed fish. Shirtless, poorly lit mirror selfies. Awkward, forced grins that did not reach their eyes. Swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. The few who did message me were either aggressively pushy, disappointingly shallow, or just painfully boring. I was on the verge of deleting the app for good when one night, sprawled on my couch in old sweatpants, a profile made me pause. His name was Julian. The profile picture was not flashy or staged. It was just a simple close-up shot of his face. He had a strong, defined jawline and short, dark hair, but it was his eyes that truly stood out. They were an icy, piercing blue, sharp, and unervingly intense, like they were looking right through screen and into me. His bio was short, almost cryptic. Truth is not always what you see with your eyes. I frowned. Was it pretentious? Maybe, but it was different. And something about those eyes made me swipe right. It was an instant match. Within minutes, a message appeared. "Julian, couldn't help but notice your smile. It is the kind people write poems about." Me, that is unexpectedly poetic for Tinder. "Julian, maybe I am not the typical Tinder guy." The conversation flowed with a surprising, almost suspicious ease. He asked thoughtful, engaging questions: what books I liked, what music I listened to, what made me genuinely laugh. Most guys on the app asked where I lived or if I was up. Julian felt different, almost old-fashioned in his approach. Over the next week, we talked every single day. I learned he was 30, worked in graphic design, and had grown up just outside the city. He loved art and had a passion for darker Gothic literature. He quoted Edgar Allan Poe to me one night, over text. We loved with a love that was more than love. I should have rolled my eyes at the melodrama, but instead, I found myself smiling like a teenager with a crush. Eventually, he asked me out. Coffee. Something simple, no pressure. I agreed. We met on a chilly Friday evening at a small, independent cafe a few blocks from my apartment in the city of Port Ivory. When I saw him in person, my stomach did a nervous little flip. He was taller than I expected, with broad shoulders, and was dressed neatly in a black button-down shirt that made his eyes seem even bluer. "Amelia?" he asked, his voice smoother, richer than I would imagine. "Yeah, hi." The first few minutes were a little awkward, the way first dates always are. But just like online, the conversation soon began to flow. We talked about books he adored, Poe, of course, and I confessed my guilty pleasure for cheap, mass-market mystery novels. He teased me, but in a light, charming way that made me feel comfortable. 2 hours flew by without me even noticing. When the cafe started closing up for the night, he walked me outside into the crisp autumn air. I had a really good time, he said, his voice low and intimate. "Me too." He hesitated for a moment, his gaze lingering on my face. "How about dinner at my place next week? I cook better than I order takeout. I promise." I should have been more cautious. A man I barely knew his apartment. Every rule of dating safety screamed no, but after weeks of suffocating silence and crushing loneliness, his attention felt like a drug, and it was intoxicating. So I agreed. The following Thursday, I found myself standing outside his apartment building. It was an older brick structure with ornate, wrought iron railings, tucked away between newer, soulless glass and steel buildings. He buzzed me in and I climbed the narrow, winding stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. Julian greeted me at the door, pulling me into a dimly lit apartment that smelled faintly of rich spices and something else. Something smoky and vaguely sweet. The dining table was already set 2 places, with flickering candles casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "You were not kidding about cooking," I said, a nervous smile on my face. "Family recipes," he replied, his grin boyish and disarming. Dinner was good, at least at first. He would made some kind of lamb dish, he said. It was tender and flavorful, though it had a slightly heavy, gamey taste I could not quite place. We ate while talking about art, literature, and the city. He recited lines of poetry from memory with a chilling, theatrical intensity, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. It should have felt romantic. Instead, a strange, unsettling feeling began to creep over me, like a cold draft in a warm room. There was a hunger in his gaze, but it was not desire. It was something darker, something predatory. After dinner, he gestured toward a small balcony. "You will love the view. Let us get some fresh air." The balcony was small, cluttered with a large, covered grill and a heavy, galvanized metal bucket tucked in the corner. The city lights stretched out below us like a sea of scattered, glittering stars. But the air out here was thick with a strange, cloying odor. It was meaty and metallic, like a butcher shop on a hot day. "Something smells weird," I said, wrinkling my nose. Julian laughed, but the sound was hollow and brittle, just grilling up a little something extra. Another family recipe. He lifted the heavy lid of the grill. A single, thick, grayish-brown patty sizzled on the grate, its edges blackened and charred. My stomach lurched when I saw it. A long, single strand of blonde hair was tangled around the meat, glistening with grease. That does not look very good," I muttered, taking an involuntary step back. His smile vanished instantly. His eyes hardened, the blue turning to chips of ice. "I promise you will love it. Just try a piece. Amelia." My blood ran cold. I do not feel well. I should probably go." "No, you do not," he growled, his hand clamping down on my wrist like a manacle. His grip was like iron. "What are you doing?" I yelped, my voice thin with terror, as I tried to pull away. "Don't you see?" His face twisted into a grotesque mask of desperation and raw fury. "We are meant to be together. Forever. You are not leaving me." The smell grew stronger, and I gagged, the taste of bile rising in my throat. Desperate, I shoved him with all my might, stumbling backward into the corner of the small balcony. My foot hit the metal bucket. It tipped over with a loud, deafening clang, revealing what was hidden inside. Bones, a pile of them, and a human skull, bleached white and staring up at me with empty eye sockets. I screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. Julian lunged for me. "Don't ruin this. Amelia!" Adrenaline cold and sharp, surged through me. My hand shot out, my fingers closing around a handle of a long metal spatula resting on the side of the grill. Without thinking, I swung it with all the force I could muster. The heavy metal edge cracked against the side of his head with a sickening, wet thud. He collapsed to the ground without a sound, a dark trickle of blood running from his temple. Shaking uncontrollably, my mind a blank slate of shock, I dropped the spatula and bolted. I ran down the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps, through the lobby and out into the cold, indifferent night air. My fingers fumbled as I dialed 911, sobbing hysterically into phone, unable to form coherent sentences. The police stormed the apartment. They found Julian unconscious, but alive. But what they discovered inside that apartment turned my stomach and haunted my nightmares for years to come. A locked room, hidden behind a bookcase, filled with the preserved remains of other young women. All of them had been lured to their deaths through dating apps. All of them had been promised romance. The news reports exploded the next day. Tinder predator captured. I was the only one who had survived, the only one who had gotten away before becoming another meal, another gruesome trophy in his collection. But survival did not feel like a victory. It felt like a curse. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see his face in that flickering, demonic candlelight. I can still hear his hollow laugh. I can still smell that meaty, metallic stench clinging to the night air. And sometimes in the dead of night, when I am all alone, I hear his voice again, whispering the words he said to me on that balcony. We are meant to be together forever. I was not exactly proud of the way I used Tinder back in 2015. At 29, I was fresh out of a messy, soul-crushing breakup. For years with someone who decided one day, with chilling finality, that she wanted something more stable than me, a guy who worked long, grueling shifts at a tech company, ate takeout 3 nights a week from greasy cardboard boxes, and lived in a sterile, one-bedroom apartment on the industrial outskirts of Harrow Creek. The truth was, I was not looking for stability back then. I did not even know what that looked like. I wanted distraction, a little excitement, something to fill the gaping void she had left behind. And if I was being brutally honest with myself, I wanted validation. I wanted to feel wanted again. Most nights after work, I would lie in bed in the dark, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face, and scroll endlessly through profiles until my eyes burned and the faces all blurred into one. Sometimes I would get a match. Sometimes I would not. Usually, it was just a series of dead-end, passionless conversations that fizzled out after a few lines of meaningless text. But then there was her, Genevieve. Her profile caught me completely off guard. It was different. There were no exaggerated, cutesy filters, no blurry, low-angle bathroom selfies, just 3 clear, well-lit photos that seemed to capture a genuine personality. In one, she was sitting on a rustic porch swing in a sundress, with the golden hour sunlight catching in her dark, wavy hair. Another showed her leaning against an old, glowing jukebox in what looked like a dive bar, a genuine, unforced laugh on her face. The last was a close-up of her face. She had sharp, high cheekbones, piercing, intelligent green eyes, and the kind of subtle smirk that made you wonder what secret she was keeping from the world. Her bio was short, confident, and to the point, 36, divorced. Collector of stories. Fan of loud guitars and quiet nights. Don't waste my time. I swiped right instantly, a strange feeling of nervous anticipation in my chest. When we matched, I felt that small, familiar, pathetic surge of dopamine. Our first messages were playful, sharp, and almost too easy. Me, collector of stories. Huh, that sounds dangerous. Genevieve, only if you become one of them. Me, guess I am willing to take that risk. Genevieve, good. Most men bore me after 5 minutes. You have got until Friday to prove you are different. She suggested a bar she liked called the Iron Bell, a small, unassuming dive tucked away in an older, forgotten part of town. I remember the weather that night vividly. It was raining, one of those steady, relentless Midwestern drizzles that made the road shine like black, slick mirrors and the world feel gray and washed out. I almost texted her to cancel, blaming the weather, But something about the way Genevieve carried herself through text confident, bold, unshaken pulled me in. I had to meet her. When I stepped inside the bar, the place smelled of old wood polish, sizzling fried food and stale, spilled beer. The air was thick with history. Neon beer signs glowed faintly on the dark with panel walls, and the worn wooden booths were carved up with the initials and decorations of loved people who had come and gone decades before. And then I saw her. She was sitting in a corner booth, half shrouded in the low, warm amber light, a glass of dark liquor in her hand. She wore a black leather jacket over a simple top. Her dark hair was loose and fell around her shoulders, and her sharp green eyes were scanning the titles on the jukebox. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled like she already knew me, like I was an old friend she had not seen in years. "Miles," she said, her voice even huskier than I would imagine, as she stood and leaned in for a quick, familiar kiss on the cheek. "Genevieve," I said, my own voice sounding weak in comparison. "Wow, you look..." She smirked, a knowing look in her eyes. Better than my photos. Or worse. Definitely better, I admitted. And her laugh was a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down my spine. She waved me into the booth and signaled for the bartender. The conversation flowed easier than any I would ever had on a first date. We talked about everything and nothing our favorite albums, the cheesy movies we grew up watching, the weird, embarrassing habits our parents had. At one point, she told me she was seeing the Rolling Stones live back in '99. "No way," I said, leaning forward, completely captivated. I was, 13? My uncle had tickets, but would not take me because he said I was too young for that kind of corruption. Her eyes lit up with a fiery passion. "Then you missed history. That night was pure, beautiful chaos. People screaming, crying, couples breaking up and making up right there in the crowd. It was life, raw and unfiltered." I could not stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, I was not overthinking every word or checking my phone. I was just present, lost in her story. By the third drink, she leaned closer across the small table, her hand brushing against mine, sending a jolt of electricity through me. "I should warn you," she said softly, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I do not do the whole boyfriend-girlfriend routine. I like moments, nights, memories, not promises." "That sounds perfect to me," I said without a moment's hesitation, meaning it completely. She tilted her head, studying my face intently, as if searching for something. "Good. You do not seem like the type to bore me." When the bar started to thin out, and the bartender began wiping down tables, she suggested we leave. Her car was parked nearby, an old, heavy black sedan that smelled faintly of vanilla, leather, and old cigarettes. She drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a restless rhythm against her thigh, in perfect time with the classic rock station playing quiet. Her place was quiet, a sleeping neighborhood just outside the city. The house itself looked older than the rest on the block, a small, charming, Victorian-style bungalow with pale green paint that was peeling slightly around the edges of the window frames. As soon as we stepped inside, however, I felt a strange, indefinable shift in the atmosphere. The living room was beautiful, yes, but also strange. It was meticulously decorated with dark wood paneling, heavy velvet curtains, and a grand fireplace lined with dozens of old, sepia-toned photographs in ornate black and white frames. The only thing in the entire room that felt jarringly out of place was a rug. It was a large, cream-colored area rug, thick and plush, but it had a strange, uneven texture that did not match the antique elegance of the rest of the room. "You live here alone?" I asked, my eyes still fixed on the odd rug. She poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter before answering. "Alone now. The house was part of the divorce settlement." I hesitated, feeling like I would overstep. "Sorry, I did not mean to bring that up." She just shrugged, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Don't be." He left. I stayed. That is all that matters. We sat on the antique couch, sipping our whiskey. Her hand brushed against mine again, but this time it lingered. Her confidence was intoxicating, her honesty disarming. "You have this look. she said suddenly, tilting her head and studying me again, like you were trying to decide whether you were lucky or just stupid for being here. I chuckled nervously. Maybe a little bit of both. Good answer, she whispered, leaning closer. Our lips met, and soon everything else blurred into a warm, intoxicating haze. Her touch, her warmth, the soft, worn scratch of her leather jacket against my shirt. My heart was racing. But then, right in the middle of it, a sudden, violent wave of intense nausea hit me. I pulled back, feeling dizzy and disoriented, my stomach twisting into a painful knot. Before I could stop it, I doubled over and vomited right onto the pale, cream-colored rug. The room went dead silent. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Genevieve froze, her body rigid, as she stared down at the mess. For a long, terrifying moment, her face was a blank, unreadable mask. Then, slowly, her expression shifted. Pure, unadulterated, venomous anger flooded in, twisting her beautiful features into something ugly and unrecognizable. "You idiot," she snapped, her voice low and dangerous as she jumped to her feet. "Do you have any idea? Any idea what you just did?" I am so sorry," I stammered, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "I did not mean to. I do not know what happened. The one thing in this entire house that is not a reminder of him," she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that seemed to come from a deep, dark place as she grabbed a towel from the kitchen. "The one perfect thing. And you ruined it." Her voice cracked on the last word, a sound of genuine anguish. I tried to help, reaching for the towel, but she shoved me back with surprising force. "Just leave," she said, her voice choked with fury that terrified me. "Get out. Now." I mumbled another pathetic apology, grabbed my jacket, and stumbled out the door into the cool, cleansing night air. My head was spinning, my stomach still in knots. I did not look back. 8 years went by. Life moved on. I got promoted. I dated other women. I even got married and divorced myself. Genevieve became just another strange, embarrassing story I would occasionally tell my friends when they asked about my worst dates. Then, 8 years later, I saw her face again. It was on the local news channel, which was playing muted on the TV at a bar I was at. Her mugshot, pale, hardened, and utterly devoid of the charm I remembered. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, almost attached. "A woman has been arrested after police uncovered a hidden, soundproof basement in her Harrow Creek home, containing evidence of multiple kidnappings and torture. The suspect, 44-year-old Genevieve Reed, is accused of luring young men to her home through various dating apps." I froze, the beer glass halfway to my lips. They showed images of the her house, the pale green bungalow. They showed photos of grim-faced investigators carrying evidence bags out the front door, bags filled with chained surgical tools and handwritten journals. The reporter continued, his voice grave. One victim managed to escape and alerted the authorities. Forensic investigators have since linked Reed to several missing persons cases spanning the last 2 decades. In perhaps the most disturbing detail of this gruesome case, police have stated that the large, cream-colored carpet found in her living room was made from human skin. My stomach dropped, the blood draining from my face. I saw the rug in my mind's eye, the rug I had vomited on, the one with the strange texture that did not match anything else in her home. And for the first time in 8 long years, I realized just how close I had come. If not for the cheap whiskey, the sudden nausea, the humiliating accident, I might have never walked out of that house alive. I would have just become another story she collected. I sat there in stunned silence for a long time, the news report looping in the background. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. Lucky or stupid, I had once told her. I finally had my answer. I never imagined that loneliness could creep into your life so quietly. It was not a sudden, violent event, like a storm breaking through a window. It was subtle, insidious, a quiet fog seeping into the corners of my days until I realized one morning, with a jolt, that I had not genuinely laughed in months. I was 28, living in the sprawling city of Ashgate, working as a graphic designer entirely from my apartment. People often romanticize remote work, imagining a life of freedom, lounging in pajamas, flexible hours, skipping the soul-crushing commute. And while those things were true, no one ever talked about how profoundly isolating it could be. Days blurred into a monotonous, gray smear. Most of my friends had either moved out of the city or were becoming increasingly buried under the weight of their own lives, marriages, babies, demanding careers. I would scroll through their posts on Instagram, vibrant photos of baby showers, sun-drenched vacations, proud home renovations. I would scroll past with a tight, forced smile that did not quite reach my eyes. For me, weekends had become a hollow ritual, a bottle of cheap wine, a Netflix series I barely paid attention to, and maybe an occasional dinner out, alone at a small table for two. I told myself I did not mind, that this solitude was a form of independence. But truthfully, there was a hollow, aching place inside me. And one Friday night, after a couple of glasses of Cabernet and a movie I could not tell you the plot of, I downloaded Tinder again. I would delete it a year earlier after a string of awkward, soul-crushingly disappointing dates. But loneliness has a way of wearing down your defenses, of lowering your guard. My thumb hovered over the newly installed icon, a toxic mix of shame and a desperate flicker of anticipation coiling in my stomach. And then I swiped. After 20 or 30 bland, forgettable profiles, one stopped me cold. Kian, 29. His pictures looked natural, refreshingly uncurated. There he was, laughing on a sun-dappled hiking trail, his hair messy, the light catching on his skin. Another photo showed him at a beach bonfire, the orange flames reflecting in his dark, intense eyes. And one, slightly blurry, captured him in a coffee shop, completely absorbed in a dog-eared paperback. He wore the same thin, woven leather bracelet in every single shot. But what caught my attention most was not the photos. It was his bio. Time is the only thing we can't get back. Let us not waste it. Something about it felt different. Less of a cliche than the usual love to travel, foodie, looking for a partner in crime nonsense. I hesitated. A part of me, the tired, cynical part, was exhausted by this cycle. Matches that fizzled into nothing. Guys who only wanted a hookup. Or worse, men who could not string together a coherent sentence. But I swiped right, and instantly a notification popped up. It is a match. My heart gave a stupid little skip. Before I could even decide whether to message him, a bubble appeared. Kian, so what does a girl like you do on a Friday night in Ashgate besides swiping on Tinder? I actually laughed. The timing was almost uncanny. Me, mostly trying to avoid bad dates. What about you? Kian, try not to be one of those bad dates. Drinks tomorrow night. I blinked at the screen. It was so straightforward, so confident. No dragging things out for days with pointless small talk. Me, you do not waste time. Do you? Kian, why waste it? It is the most precious thing in the world. Except maybe your smile. It was corny, but it worked. We talked for another hour. He told me he had grown up in Australia and had been traveling across the U.S. for the last year, staying in hostels and Airbnbs. He loved surfing, hated small talk, and swore by the philosophy of never putting things off until tomorrow. By midnight, we would exchange numbers and agreed to meet the next evening at a dimly lit, trendy bar in the old quarter. I spent way too long picking out an outfit, finally settling on black jeans and a forest green blouse. Not too flashy, but not careless. As I walked into the bar, my stomach fluttered with a nervous excitement I had not felt in years. The place buzzed with conversation and the clinking of glasses. I found a small table, ordered martini, and rehearsed possible greetings in my head. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 30. I checked my phone. No messages. By the 45-minute mark, my excitement had curdled into a familiar, hot sting of embarrassment. 2 different men approached me during that time, both offering to buy me a drink. Both brushed off with tight, forced smiles. My martini sat untouched, a single tear of condensation, tracing a path down the glass. After an hour, I finally texted him, my thumbs jabbing at the screen. Me? Hey, where are you? I have been waiting for over an hour. No reply. I tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. Furious and humiliated, I threw some cash on the table and left. When I got home, paced in my living room in a storm of anger and self-pity, my phone buzzed. A message from Kian. Kian, I was there. Didn't see you. Here's proof. Attached was a photo of the bar. The same crowd, the same warm yellow lighting. My stomach flipped. Me, where were you sitting? Kian, near the jukebox. Where were you? I frowned. I would scan the entire bar a dozen times. He had not been there. Or at least, I had not seen him. Something did not add up. He apologized relentlessly over text, saying we must have just missed each other in the crowd. He did not want things to end on a misunderstanding. Against my better judgment, I agreed to one more try. We chose a quiet, brightly lit cafe near Silverwood Square for Saturday afternoon. No excuses this time. I arrived early, ordered a latte, and sat by the window where I could see the entrance clearly. Rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the glass. I sipped my coffee, checked my phone, glanced around, and waited. 30 minutes. 45. No Kian. My face flushed with a fresh wave of embarrassment. I texted him furiously. Me, this is ridiculous. You have made a fool of me twice. Kian, I swear I was there. Look, another photo came through. This time it was at the cafe, taken from a corner table, looking directly at my empty chair. The timestamp was from just a few minutes ago. My heart stuttered. Me, are you messing with me? Kian, no. Maybe we are just cursed to miss each other. Me, I tried calling you. It did not even ring. Kian, my American SIM card is terrible. I need Wi-Fi for calls to go through. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. My instincts screamed it. That night, I blocked his number, deleted our messages, and told myself it was just another elaborate catfish, another pathetic waste of time. By February, I would nearly forgotten him. Tinder was long gone from my phone. But one night, out with friends at a loud, crowded club in the Fishtown district, I saw him. Or at least, I thought I did. The same tousled dark hair, the same lean frame, and on his wrist, the same woven leather bracelet. He was standing at the back of the room, half shrouded in the pulsing strobe lights, his eyes locked directly on me. My heart jolted. I pushed my way through the dense crowd, but by the time I reached the spot where he had been standing, he was gone. That night, curiosity, like a sickness, clawed at me. Against all reason, I unblocked his number. I called. No ring. Minutes later, a message buzzed in. It was a photo of the nightclub, taken that night, from the exact spot where I had seen him standing. Me, what the hell is going on? Who are you? Kian, I just want to see you again. I owe you answers. Before I could respond, another message arrived. It was a screenshot of a news article from a local website. The headline read, Australian traveler found dead in Ashgate Hostel. The article identified him as 29-year-old Kian Sellers, believed to be the fourth victim in a string of suspected dating app poisonings. The photo in the article was unmistakable. The boyish grin, the intense eyes, the leather bracelet. The date of death was 3 months ago. 3 months before we ever matched. My hands trembled so violently, I almost dropped my phone. Me, this is not funny. How are you sending these? The reply was instant. Kian, thank you for liberating me. My vision blurred. Then another buzz, another photo. It was a picture of me, sitting on my couch, phone in my hand, horror carved into my face. It had been taken from behind me, from inside my apartment. My blood froze. Slowly, mechanically, my body stiff with terror, I turned. The apartment was empty. Empty, except for something lying on the floor in the middle of the room. A thin, woven leather bracelet. The same one from his photos. I never really thought of myself as the dating app type of guy. Growing up in a quiet, sleepy suburb outside of Westbridge. I was always more comfortable in small, familiar circles, a handful of friends I would known since middle school, a few co-workers from a warehouse, and the occasional girl I would meet through mutual connections at a backyard barbecue. But when I turned 21 in the fall of 2017, things started to change. Most of my friends had either gone off to college or moved to bigger cities in search of something more, and I was stuck working long, monotonous shifts at a local auto parts warehouse. My nights after work felt achingly empty, a hollow space filled only by the glow of the television. That is when my buddy Leo leaned across the sticky table at Buffalo Wild Wings one Friday night and said, "Dude, you've got to try Tinder. Everyone's on it. I have hooked up twice this month just from swiping on my lunch break." At first, I laughed him off. Man, I am not about to go chasing random girls online. It feels fake, desperate. Leo shook his head, smirking as he dipped a greasy wing into a plastic cup of ranch dressing. "You are missing out. Seriously, even if nothing happens, it is fun just to talk to people. Just try it. Maybe it was the cheap beer. Maybe it was the crushing weight of the loneliness." But when I got home that night, I downloaded Tinder. For the next few months, I did not take it too seriously. It was more of a game than anything else. I went on a couple of casual, forgettable dates. One ended with both of us mutually realizing we had absolutely nothing in common. Another with me sitting alone in a Starbucks for 45 minutes after being stood up. Still, I cannot deny the small, pathetic thrill that came from matching with someone attractive. It was addictive in its own quiet, sad way. By winter, I was using Tinder whenever I was bored. Swipe left, swipe right, repeat. Most nights ended with nothing. But then one weekend in January of 2018, everything shifted. That Friday, I had plans to drive down to the city of Hollifield to visit an old high school buddy, Marcus, who was studying at the local university. He promised me a weekend of parties, cheap drinks, and the kind of youthful chaos I had not experienced in months. When I got to Marcus's cramped, messy apartment, he greeted me with a cold beer and a hard slap on the back. About time, man. Tonight's going to be nuts. And he was right. We bounced between two different house parties, met up with some of his classmates, and by the time we stumbled back to his place around 2:00 a.m., I was exhausted, but my mind was still buzzing. Laying on the lumpy couch with my phone, I opened Tinder out of habit. That is when I saw her profile. Her name was Audrey. She was 20, a student at the university, and her picture showed a bright, genuine smile framed by dark brown hair. She wore a thin, delicate silver locket in almost every shot. She had this approachable, sweet girl next door vibe that instantly stood out from the dozens of over-filtered, pouting selfies I usually scroll past. I swipe right. It is a match. I grinned, a surge of adrenaline replacing my fatigue. I messaged her right away. "Me? Hey," could not sleep either. She responded almost instantly. "Audrey, haha, nope. Just got back from hanging with some friends. What about you?" "Me, same. I am visiting a buddy here for the weekend. First time in Hollifield in a while." We went back and forth for over an hour. She was funny, quick-witted, and incredibly easy to talk to. Around 3:30 a.m., she suggested we meet up the next night. "Audrey, you should come by tomorrow evening. My roommates are gone for the weekend, and I do not feel like going out again. We could just hang out, maybe watch a movie." Marcus was passed out and snoring loudly in his room. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Normally, I would hesitate. An invitation like that, so soon, was usually a red flag. But something about her tone so casual, so confident made me say yes. The next evening, after another day of hanging out with Marcus, I decided to go. Around 9:30 p.m., I left his apartment and drove the 10 minutes across town to the address Audrey had texted me. The area was not great. The streetlights buzzed and flickered dimly, casting a sickly yellow glow on the cracked pavement, and a few of the houses had boarded up windows. Still, I figured college towns always had their sketchy pockets. I pulled up to the apartment complex she would describe, a row of aging, nondescript brick buildings with narrow, dark stairwells leading up to units. I texted her, "Me here. Which door is yours?" I waited in my car, the engine idling, glancing nervously at the shadowy building. A few minutes passed. No response. Then my phone buzzed. "Audrey, the front door of the building should be open. Just come in and head down the hall. I will meet you." Something about that felt deeply off. Most people would just say second floor, door on the left, or something specific. Leaving the main front door of an apartment building unlocked at night, especially in this neighborhood. I hesitated, my hand on the gear shift, staring at the dark, imposing building. Then I reminded myself not to overthink it. She probably just did not want to give out her exact apartment number until she knew for sure that I was real. I parked, shut off the car, and walked toward the entrance. The heavy metal door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. She was right. It was not locked. Inside, the hallway was dimly lit by a single, flickering, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of damp mildew and something else. Something metallic and vaguely unpleasant. I ran my hand along the grimy wall, looking for a light switch when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was coming from one of the upstairs apartments, but then it became clearer. It was close. Just ahead, maybe 2 doors down, someone hissed softly, urgently, "Sure, he is right outside." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. My chest tightened, my ears straining in the dead silence that followed. For a second, I thought maybe Audrey did have roommates after all. Maybe they were messing with her, playing a prank on her Tinder date. But the tone of that whisper, it was not playful. It was sharp, urgent, and filled with a kind of predatory anticipation. I took a slow, deliberate step back, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the cracked linoleum floor. That is when I noticed a movement, a flicker of shadows through the cheap, plastic blinds of a ground floor window to my right. Shapes, multiple, indistinct shapes, but they were definitely human, and they were watching me. My stomach dropped like a stone. I did not wait to find out more. Spinning on my heel, I bolted back through the entrance, my heart hammering in my throat. My breath puffed out in white clouds in the cold night air as I sprinted for my car. Fumbling my keys was shaking. Clumsy hands before diving inside and slamming the locks. For a long moment, I just sat there, gasping for air, staring at the dark windows of the building. Nothing moved. Nobody came out. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. It was Audrey. "Audrey, where'd you go? I've been waiting all night." My fingers trembled as I blocked the number without replying. The drive back to Marcus's apartment was a blur. My thoughts spiraled. There was no Audrey. There never had been. Someone, or maybe several people, had lured me there. If I would walked even a few steps further down that dark hallway, if I had knocked on that door, what would have happened? Back at the apartment, I tried to explain it to Marcus, but he was half asleep and just laughed it off. "Man, you were being paranoid. It was probably just her friends messing with you." But deep down, I knew better. The voice, the figures in the window, that unlocked front door. It was not a prank. It was a trap. I never heard from Audrey again. Weeks later, back home, my curiosity got the better of me. I used a reverse image search on the screenshots I would taken of her profile. The photos belonged to some random girl's public Instagram account. A girl who lived in a completely different state. Her identity had been stolen. Someone in Hollifield had been using her pictures, baiting guys like me, and I still wonder, late at night when I can't sleep, what exactly was waiting for me in that dark, mildew-scented apartment if I had not trusted my gut and run. All I know for sure is that it was not a girl named Audrey. I never thought I would be the kind of guy to download Tinder. For most of my 20s, I was in a serious, long-term relationship. 6 years of my life were completely wrapped up with one girl, someone I genuinely thought was it for me. We lived together. We planned trips together. We even talked about marriage in that vague, when the timing feels right kind of way. But in the late fall of 2020, right in the middle of the chaos and uncertainty of the pandemic, she told me she was not happy anymore. There was no dramatic betrayal, no screaming match, just a quiet, devastating evening where she looked me dead in the eyes and said she just could not see a future with me anymore. I won't lie, it broke me. I moved out of the apartment we had shared in the city of Silver Creek, boxed up 6 years of shared memories and inside jokes, and rented a small, soulless place on the edge of town. For months, I did not want to see anyone. My friends tried their best to pull me out of it, invited me to bars, texting me about road trips, insisting that I would bounce back. But I was not the type to just go meet a stranger at a bar, and the idea of starting all over again from scratch felt profoundly exhausting. By the spring of 2021, though, I started to feel restless. My evenings were hollow and silent. I would sit at my small kitchen table, scrolling mindlessly through YouTube or binging entire seasons of shows I did not really care about. I missed connection. I missed the small, simple things, like someone asking me how my day was, or sharing stupid inside jokes that no one else would understand. That is when my buddy Finn said, "Dude, just download Tinder. Everyone's on it now because of the pandemic. You will at least get out of your rut." I laughed him off at first. Dating apps had never appealed to me. They always seemed so artificial, like a marketplace for people. But eventually, a mix of loneliness and sheer curiosity got the better of me one night. With a couple of beers in me for courage, I downloaded Tinder and awkwardly set up a profile. It was an excruciating process. I had not written a bio about myself since my college applications, and my photos were a sad, random mix of old Facebook shots and blurry vacation selfies. Still, I figured I would give it a try. The first few weeks were rough. Most of my matches ghosted me after a few messages. Some were clearly bots with nonsensical replies. I went on one actual date with a girl named Maya at a public park. After 20 minutes of stiff, painful small talk, she pulled a classic fake phone call, excused herself with a pained expression, and left. I never heard from her again. I was ready to delete the app for good when I matched with someone who seemed different. Her name was Leah. She had brown hair, shoulder length, with a faint reddish tint that caught my eye in every photo. Her smile was not forced or posed like most of the selfies I would scroll past. It was wide, unguarded, and seemed completely genuine. She wore a simple flannel shirt in one picture and no makeup in another. Something about that felt real and refreshing. I swiped right more out of the last flicker of hope than any real expectation. When we matched instantly, I actually muttered out loud, "No way." Her first message came quickly. "Leah, hey, you actually live in Oak Haven. I used to work over there." That kicked things off. We talked about local coffee shops, public parks, the dumb high school jobs we would had. She worked in healthcare administration, which seemed to fit her practical, no-nonsense vibe. After a few days of constant messaging, she suggested we meet. "Leah, would you be down for a walk? There's a park in Northwood with a lake and some nice trails. It is really pretty this time of year." My gut reaction was caution. A stranger, a park, dusk, every online dating horror story I would ever heard flashed in my head. But she seemed so real. Her social media profiles checked out, her conversation style was not robotic or scripted, and she even teased me for being too careful. I agreed. We settled on a Thursday evening around 5:00 p.m., both of us heading there right after work. That night, I pulled into the park's gravel lot a few minutes early. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they should have. I was nervous, more nervous than I would have been in years. I checked my phone. A new text from Leah. "Leah, just walking up by the pavilion. I will wave." I looked up and there she was, the same girl from the pictures. Same reddish-brown hair, same warm smile, wearing a faded denim jacket, jeans, and sneakers. She waved, and my stomach did the stupid, hopeful flip. Okay, I muttered to myself. She is real. She is actually real. I stepped out of my car, trying not to look like a total wreck. "Leah," I called out. "Hi, Ben," she said warmly. We shook hands awkwardly at first, then both laughed at how stiff and formal it felt. That broke the ice. We spent the next couple of hours sitting at a weathered picnic table, just talking. The conversation was incredibly easy. We compared embarrassing family stories, bad first jobs, even dumb things like our go-to gas station snacks. For the first time in a very long time, I felt myself genuinely relax around someone new. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass, she glanced at the lake and said, "Want to walk a trail before it gets too dark?" Normally, I would have said no. Walking through wooded trails at dusk with someone I had just met was not a smart move. But the way she said it, so casual, so trusting, made me nod. Sure, let us do it. The trail was quiet, winding along the edge of the placid lake. The water reflected the faint, beautiful streaks of orange and purple from the sunset. Fireflies began to blink in the growing twilight near the brush. We even held hands at one point, and I was shocked by how natural and right it felt. By the time it got fully dark, we turned back toward the parking lot. That is when things changed. I noticed a figure up ahead on the trail. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark, but the faint moonlight filtering through the trees clearly outlined a man standing motionless in the middle of the path. Just standing. Leah stopped dead in her tracks beside me. "Do you see him?" she whispered, her voice tight. "Yeah," I said, my own voice sounding strained. She called out, her voice stronger than I expected. "Hey, do you need something?" The man did not move. He just stared in our direction. The air suddenly felt different, heavy and charged with new energy. I wanted to back away quietly, to pretend we had not seen him and just turn around. But Leah, braver than me, raised her voice again. "Hello." Still nothing. As we got a little closer, my stomach dropped. The man shifted his weight slightly, and I saw him pull his arms out from behind his back, revealing a large, gleaming hunting knife. "Hands up, turn around," he barked, his voice low, rough, and guttural. My legs locked up. I had never been in a situation like this in my entire life. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but my body would not budge. I glanced at Leah. For a split, ugly second, a sliver of suspicion crept into my mind. Was this a setup? But the sheer, unadulterated terror on her face answered that question instantly. Before I could process what was happening, she lunged. She charged at the guy, slamming into him with her entire body. He staggered, completely caught off guard, and fell backward onto the dirt path with a grunt. "Run!" she screamed at me. I froze like an idiot for another heartbeat. Then my legs finally unlocked and I bolted. Leah scrambled up beside me, and together we sprinted toward the parking lot. Behind us, heavy, pounding footsteps echoed on the trail. He was chasing us. "Faster," Leah yelled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. We cut through a side path, thorny branches whipping and tearing at our arms, until the gravel lot finally came into view. We sprinted to her car, dove inside, and she slammed the locks. Her hand shook violently as she fumbled with the keys, finally jamming one into the ignition and starting the engine. Gravel sprayed as we tore out of the lot. I risked a single glance in the rearview mirror. The man was standing at the edge of the lot, the knife still clutched in his hand, motionless as he watched us leave. What chilled me most was not that he did not follow us. It was that there were other cars still in the lot. 3 of them parked and empty. Were they his? Were others waiting? We called the cops as soon as we were a few miles away. They took our statements over the phone, but by the time a patrol car arrived at the park, the man was gone. The lot was nearly empty, except for my car. The officer tried to reassure us, saying maybe it was just some disturbed individual, maybe even a prank. But Leah and I both knew it was not. That knife was not a prop. That night, still buzzing with adrenaline, we ended up at a 24-hour diner. Over greasy pancakes and bottomless cups of coffee, we replayed everything. Talking about it felt surreal, like it had happened in a movie, but the dark, angry bruises already forming on Leah's arm, where she would slam into the man said otherwise. And strangely, it brought us closer. That shared terror, the incredible, selfless way she would throw herself into danger without a second thought. It created a bond one had not expected. We kept seeing each other after that. Dinners, movies, quiet evenings at my place. Slowly, the shadow of that night began to fade into the background, though it never disappeared completely. 2 years later, Leah and I were engaged. Sometimes when people ask us how we met, we usually laugh before telling them Tinder, and we almost got murdered on our first date. The looks on their faces never get old. But late at night, when I close my eyes, I still sometimes see him. That dark figure standing in the moonlight, the knife in his hand, watching us. And I will never forget the chilling feeling that we were not supposed to make out of those woods alive. That maybe, just maybe, someone else did not. I was not the type of person who thought dating apps would ever become a normal part of my life. In high school, I mostly kept to myself. I was not the most popular kid, but I was not a complete outcast either. I had my small, tight-knit circle of friends, and for the most part, that was enough. Our graduating class was huge, over 500 students, so I barely scratched the surface when it came to knowing most of my classmates. Honestly, it felt like I was surrounded by strangers every single day, even after 4 years of walking the same hallways. When I left for college, I promised myself I would branch out more, try to be more social. That is when dating apps started to feel like an appealing shortcut, a way to connect with people without all the awkward, forced hallway conversations or trying to psych myself up to go to parties where I knew no one. I downloaded Tinder during my sophomore year, and it quickly became this strange, compelling blend of entertainment and genuine possibility. I was not really landing a lot of dates at first, but it was a thrill just to match with people who I would always thought were completely out of my reach back in high school. One night, I was sitting in my off-campus apartment in the city of Northgate, Connecticut, swiping aimlessly out of boredom. That is, when I came across a familiar face. Her name was Cassie Mendoza. She had been in my grade all through high school. We followed each other on Instagram, and I would seen her Snapchat stories before, but the truth was, we would never exchange a single word in person. She was one of those girls popular, beautiful, always surrounded by friends. Her Tinder profile looked legit. It had the same pictures I would seen on her social media accounts. Something about seeing her there hit me harder than the usual matches. Maybe it was a nostalgia, or maybe just a surreal idea that we could have known each other years ago, but never did. So, with my heart pounding a little faster than usual, I sent the first message. Hey Cassie, this is crazy. We went to the same high school and never talked once. How have you been? She responded within minutes. Cassie, I know, right? That is so funny. I have been good. Just super busy with school and life. LOL. What about you? The conversation flowed easier than I ever could have expected. We reminisced a little about high school, about mutual teachers, and painfully long assemblies. We talked about the way everyone seemed to vanish into their own little cliques. It felt surreal to finally be talking to her, to be on her radar. After about 20 minutes of easy flirty chatting, she sent a message that made my stomach drop. Cassie, we should hang out tonight. I am down if you are. I hesitated for a second. Usually, I would suggest meeting at a coffee shop or grabbing food somewhere public first, but she jumped straight to hanging out. Me? Yeah, I would be down. Want to grab drinks or food somewhere? Cassie, nah. I would rather just chill at your place. Is that cool? That reply sent a weird, conflicting mix of excitement and nervousness through me. Honestly, a big part of me liked the idea. No public awkwardness. No trying to figure out where to go. Just straight to hanging out. Me? Sure, that works. My roommates are gone for the night, so it is just me here. Cassie, perfect. Are your parents around, or is it just you? That question struck me as odd. Why would it matter if my parents were home? But I was too excited to dwell on it. I brushed it off. Me? Nope, just me. My little sister is visiting for the weekend. but she is upstairs. Cassie, cool. Drop me your address, and I will head over soon. I sent it without overthinking. Then it became a waiting game. At first, I sat on the couch, pretending to watch Netflix, half expecting a message at any moment saying she was on her way. 10 minutes turned into 30. An hour passed. I opened Tinder to send her a follow-up message. No reply. Then out of habit, I checked her Instagram, and that is when things turned sideways. She had posted a new story just 15 minutes ago, a random meme with her friend's username tagged. I saw the same thing on her Snapchat. She was clearly hanging out with a friend, another girl from our high school. Confused, I commented on her Instagram story. Me? Hey, are you still coming over later? She opened it almost immediately and replied, Cassie, what are you talking about? I frowned at my phone. Me, we have been chatting on Tinder. You literally said you were coming over tonight. Her typing bubble popped up, then disappeared, then popped up again. Then her response came. Cassie, I do not even have Tinder. Send me the profile. My stomach dropped. I screenshotted the fake profile and sent it to her. Her next message hit me like a brick. Cassie, that is a catfish. Report it as soon as you can. That is not me. I instantly reported it. Tinder unmatched the profile automatically, but I was not thinking about the app anymore. My pulse quickened as the reality of the situation crashed down on me. I had just given my full address to someone pretending to be her. And worse, I had told them my parents were not home and that I was only there with my younger sister. I locked every single door in the house, checking the deadbolts twice. I went around and locked every window I could reach. My sister, Maya, who was 14 at the time, noticed me pacing frantically around the living room and asked what was wrong. I did not want to scare her, so I just told her not to worry, but to make sure her bedroom window was locked. She shrugged it off, but I could not shake the thick, cloying sense of unease. Hours dragged on. Nothing happened. Slowly, my guard began to slip. I started to think maybe it was just a cruel, elaborate prank. Around midnight, I was still on the couch, dozing off, when I heard a scream. It was a sharp, terrified sound, and it came from Maya's room upstairs. I bolted off the couch and sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. She flung her door open at the same moment. I reached the top of the landing. Her face was chalky white in the dim hallway light, her eyes wide with terror that looked like she had seen a ghost. There's someone outside my window, she cried, her voice trembling. I saw him. He was just staring at me. My chest tightened. I ran into her room and to the window. By the time I got there, the backyard was empty and still. But it was not a coincidence. It could not be. I tried calling my parents, but they did not answer. Maya was shaking so hard, she begged to sleep in my room. I agreed, trying to act calm and in control, while my brain was racing, picturing 100 different horrible scenarios. We stayed in my room. I kept the television on, the volume low, just for the noise. Eventually, sheer exhaustion got the better of me. I did not know how long I was asleep, but I woke to a faint creak from downstairs. Maya sat bolt upright in the bed at the same time. We both heard it. Was that? She whispered, her eyes huge in the dark. Yeah, my phone was already in my hand. I dialed 911, whispering into the receiver that I thought someone had broken into my house. That is when it happened. Footsteps approached our door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The doorknob jiggled, then turned. It did not open because I had locked it out of sheer paranoia when we came into the room. A deep, gravelly male voice growled through the wood. I know you are in there. I can smell you. Maya burst into quiet, terrified sobs beside me. The 911 operator on the line told me to stay calm, to get into the closet if possible. I grabbed Maya's arm and motioned for her to follow me. We crouched in the dark, cramped closet, holding our breath as the banging on the door started. It was loud, heavy, like he was trying to break it down with his shoulder. Maya finally cracked. "The police are coming," she screamed, her voice high and shrill with panic. "Leave us alone." The banging stopped instantly. For a few agonizing seconds, the silence was even worse than the noise. Then came a laugh. It was low, chilling, and right outside our door. And then nothing. Minutes later, which felt like an eternity, red and blue lights filled the windows of my room. The operator told me it was safe to come out. I rushed downstairs and let the police in. They searched the entire house, room by room, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found nothing, but they did find something deeply unsettling. The metal awning beneath my parents' bedroom window was bent and dented slightly, as if someone had used it as a foothold to climb into their unlocked window. The officers told me that whoever was probably bolted the second Maya yelled about the police. They recommended we leave the house for the night. I drove Maya to my friend Daniel's place, where we stayed until the sun came up. To this day, I can't even think about using a dating app without verifying who I am talking to across multiple platforms. That night changed the way I see online interactions forever. Someone out there knew exactly where I lived. Someone had been inside my house. And the scariest part of all is that they never caught him.